Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ron Corning. We all know COVID-19 has turned our world upside down, and it's also brought to light some very important questions and issues about living well and living responsibly in 2020 and beyond that. So in this special Timeless in Texas discussion, we're bringing together four panelists. They are leading experts in the field of finance, legal, lifestyle, and healthcare. We want to discuss a number of things: asset protection, retirement and estate planning, downsizing and forever homes, and the latest COVID-19 developments about how to best protect yourself and your loved ones. So Timeless in Texas is a special section within the Dallas Morning News that celebrates the 55 plus community in North Texas with a full range of topics and discussions that are relevant to this generation. We have Virginia Hammerle joining us from Hammerle Finley Law Firm, and she's here to talk about so many of the things that maybe we know about, but we never quite take the steps to get there because we think maybe we won't be affected by it immediately. First and foremost, the will. Let's talk about that. Virginia, yes, the will. It is that one document, is it not, where we always hear about it. Somebody passes away. What were their intentions? What did they want with their belongings, with their possessions, and so forth? But people overlook it. We hear all the time about people dying without a will. Why do we overlook that?
I think because sometimes people don't want to deal with the idea that they're going to die. And they don't want to spend the money that's necessary to take care of things now. And that's a big mistake.
There are also people who don't have families necessarily yet. There are single people, and they're young. So when we're younger, we don't really embrace mortality, nor do we think that we have anybody in our lives who will be affected in a financial way, or we don't have enough to leave anybody, and so forth. That's a misnomer as well, is it not?
That absolutely is. Everybody has an estate of some kind, even if it's just a car and a small savings account. So it's important that they at least get the basic documents in place. And a will is the primary and fundamental document that everybody needs to have.
Okay, so we're going to run down some other things as well. The will, power of attorney, durable financial power of attorney, a HIPAA release, directive to physicians, designation of guardian, designation of burial agent. I mean, these are all things. These are not contained necessarily in a will. You don't need just one document. You need a series of documents. That durable financial power of attorney, what does that apply to?
So the financial power of attorney applies to who is going to help you with your finances if you're unable to do so. And if you have a good durable power of attorney, then if you do have a stroke or you do get in that car accident, it means that somebody's not going to have to get a guardianship over you. You have somebody that you trust, that you have chosen to help handle the financials, make the investment decisions, pay your bills.
So if you have a parent, for example, who is ill or has a stroke or might not be able to make decisions for themselves, my understanding was it automatically goes to the relative closest to them, a daughter, a son. That's not necessarily true, is it?
That is not true. There is no statutory or common law right for somebody else to manage your finances.
To me, that's really the headline here, is that what people think is conventional wisdom and knowledge about, well, it's my mom, so I'm the one responsible for her. You need to think twice about that.
And where you're going to find that out is the first time you try and access their bank account to pay a bill. Bank is not going to be happy with you if you do that. Or if you have to sign a contract to put them in a nursing home or take care of a medical bill. If you don't have that financial power of attorney, your designated agent, the person you think would be your agent, is not going to have any authority.
So in my case, my mom always had me on her checking account, which allowed me, if I needed to, in her absence, to take care of any finances. But that's still not enough.
That is not enough. And you've got to think about it now with the current financial climate. If a bank thinks that somebody is being exploited, like an elder, they're going to freeze that account. And you're going to have absolutely no authority to try and combat that.
That's remarkable. So a power of attorney, as I've always understood it, is the ability for a family member to make a decision for a loved one, or it may not even be a member of their own family, in the event that they're not able to make decisions on their own medically. Can you get a power of attorney that's all-encompassing, that includes that financial component?
That is not a good idea. The statute in Texas sets out two completely different forms as a base form and two completely different rights and indemnifications if you use their basic form. A durable financial power of attorney, they have a set form that you use as a starting point, and then you enhance it the way you want to. It's very important not to use just the form out of the statute because it doesn't cover enough. The medical power of attorney is a completely different document, and under the statute as it exists right now, you have to use exactly the form that's in the statute. You don't enhance it, you don't change it.
What about a HIPAA release? How does that differ from or supplement a power of attorney?
So the medical power of attorney only goes into effect if you, the principal, are incapacitated. And incapacity can come in and out. So if you're in the operating table and you're under anesthesia, you can't make your own medical decisions. Your agent can. But when you come back out and you're no longer under anesthesia, your agent has no authority to make any more medical decisions. The problem is that because they don't have that authority, they also can't access your medical records. So the HIPAA release gives them a presently effective way to get your medical records so that they know that you're not being overdosed, so that they know that you've got the proper care.
The directive to physicians. Again, I'm looking at all of this thinking, if I've got the medical power of attorney, if I've got the HIPAA release, then I should be able to communicate to a physician what I know my loved one's wishes are. That's not true either. They need to see in writing what that loved one's intention is should they be in a position where they're on life support.
That's correct. And so the directive to physicians is also known as a living will. And what it does is it says in two situations. One is if you are incapacitated, basically, and you have been diagnosed with a disease that's going to lead to your death within 6 months, then you're saying do or do not, if the situation arises, hook me up to life-sustaining equipment. Basically, do I get the feeding tube? Do I get the intubation? That type of thing. The other situation where it arises is if you are diagnosed with an irreversible condition like dementia that's going to lead to your continued decline, then these are your written wishes in that case that you do or do not want to be hooked up to life-sustaining equipment.
I want to speak to that, not to make this about me, but I've had this experience just 7 months ago when my mom passed away. I had not realized that she had a directive to physicians. I knew she had it, and I generally knew what her wishes were. I did not understand the specifics of the language. There was a paragraph in there that she had initialed. And it said, if by your medical advice or assessment you don't believe I'll have a reasonably good quality of life, then I don't want to continue treatment. And what we found as a family is that definition of what is a reasonably good quality of life can be subjective. We then had to sort of decide as a family, would she want to live like that? Would she consider that to be a good quality of life? So it really isn't cut and dry. The directive is there, but there is some gray area.
There definitely is gray area, and it's on a state-by-state basis. Texas doesn't use that language in their base document, but you can enhance the document and put in additional language to be very clear. I always tell my clients, if they are diagnosed with an irreversible condition, or a condition that's eventually going to lead to their death pretty quickly, such as a cancer or something like that, come back in. We can particularize that language, and they need to take this document and talk to their kids, talk to their agents.
Because being more specific to the point that you can will eliminate the possibility that a family is left to judge, in this case, what's a good quality of life and what is not. That is such a painful and difficult decision to make because you don't want to let your loved one go, but you also don't want to put them in a position where they say to you, this isn't how I wanted to live. I thought I had written this out.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a slippery slope. They go in for a stroke for the first time. Do they get the stroke drugs? Yes, probably. If they go in for the 5th stroke, probably not. And so what we want to prevent is the family arguing about it, standing outside the ICU.
Designation of guardianship is another layer of protection, is it not? What you just said seems to speak to that, and that is somebody has had a stroke and can't effectively communicate. Who is going to be their number one point person to make decisions and care for them? Because you're right, family members can have different ideas of how somebody should be cared for, where they should be cared for, who should care for them.
And that's why we don't leave it up to a committee. If you've got the medical powers of attorney, if you've got the HIPAA release, if you've got the directive to physician, you have delegated and designated one person, one agent to have the final say. But if we have a huge conversation about it, if there's a lot of dispute, if we think an agent is not working in the principal's best interests, or if they're going out and getting dueling documents, so daughter's showing up with a power of attorney, next day son shows up with another power of attorney, in that case, we're going to have to go to the court, and we are going to have to get a guardianship.
So, designation of burial agent. Again, I'm coming to this generally as a layperson, looking at all of this with my own preconceived notions of how I protected my own mom. I thought that if you had a will with an executor of the will, that person also had the ability to make decisions about the burial, the ceremony, the funeral, etc. That's not necessarily true.
It is not. And think about the timing. Most wills, in fact, all wills, in order to be given effect, have to be admitted to probate in a court that has jurisdiction to do it. That takes a lot of time. And especially in these COVID-19 days, that can take months. And so you need somebody who has the authority now, at the time, to call the funeral home, to decide whether it's a whole body or a cremation, or whether we are donating body, or whatever it is we're doing, whether there's a memorial service. So the designation of agent gives that person, and it doesn't have to be a family member, gives that person authority and sets out your wishes.
Everyone deferred to me in my mother's case, but then I found out that she had given that directive to the funeral home, that I was her agent. I wasn't aware of that she had done that. So someone had counseled her along the way to make sure that, should there be any confusion, that I was the one in charge of that.
And that's perfect. That was exactly what needed to be done.
So let me ask you this. Will, power of attorney, durable financial power of attorney, HIPAA release, directive of physicians, designation of guardian, designation of burial agent can seem a little overwhelming, but you do this every day. And you make these decisions. So sitting down to do all of these documents takes how long and costs how much?
So everybody does it a little bit differently. But what I do is I usually sit down with my client or clients, if it's a husband and wife, and they have
multiple children or other
right,
things?
If they have like wishes. I usually do a introductory 2-hour conversation with them, and we go through everything. And at that point, we're making decisions, and we've talked through who's going to be the agent and what their financial situation is, what their medical situation is, what their wishes are. And then we draft up the documents. We send them to them to look at. They come back into our office to sign them, because some have to be witnessed, some have to be notarized, some have to be witnessed and notarized. And when they leave with a complete set of documents. All in, under the best of circumstances, and I've done it in less than a day, but I would prefer not to, it takes about 2 weeks. All in, from the time we initially sit down with them until the time they sign those documents.
And the cost?
Well, the cost varies.
Can you give a range? I know it depends on attorney's fees and hourly rates and so forth, but just generally a ballpark.
Probably between $2,000 and $4,000, depending on what we're doing with it.
And as I'm sitting here and you're saying this, I'm thinking about all the people who spend all the time and all the money and all the planning for a wedding and a reception, but overlook all of this. This should be, I know it's not, but it should be part of the protocol of getting married, that you get married, you get the license, and you get all of these documents, and so you know you're secure and safe should the worst case happen.
Immediately, absolutely.
Yeah, good advice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Virginia Hammerle. We'll be back with our next guest right after this. Welcome back, everyone, to Timeless in Texas. So how do you stay 50 and fabulous? Well, the folks at Del Webb will tell you, move out of your home and move into one of their communities. Wagner is joining us now to tell us more about how people are living well in your communities. There's evidence of it, Walker, everywhere. You've got 3 communities around DFW, 5,000 residents in Frisco alone.
You know, it's everyone wants to just live their lives. I think especially with the pandemic, people want to get out and have fun. And when you tell someone they can't do something, that's what they want to do. So people are flooding and pouring into our communities because they want the lifestyle, the groups and activities and relationships and friendships that we do so well since we have from 1960 at Del Webb.
You know, it's funny. There was a time when people were having children younger, and by the time you hit 50 or 55, you know, you were considered elderly. I think at 50 now you can get AARP, but the fact is what it means to be 50 is really changing, and there are empty nesters. What are you hearing from residents when they give up that big house, the yard, the lawn care, and everything that goes around with it? Are they feeling like they're able to re-embrace life in a different way?
They're thrilled. There's just this feeling of been there, done that with the larger 2-story homes. Texas, you can get a lot of home for your money, but I am finding people in their 50s and 60s, they don't want 5,000 or 6,000 square foot homes. They're perfectly happy with 1,500 to 2,500 1-story plans. There's less utilities, less bills, easier to clean.
Yeah, so part of it is the 1-story home. I know that in the event that someone's not able to go upstairs or they don't want to be upstairs, downstairs, even people who are not over 50 are choosing those floor plans. But are you seeing anything that's particular to the 55 plus community in terms of what they want when they come to you to pick out their home?
Yeah, I think the home kind of becomes secondary. And if not, once they get here and they see people playing water volleyball in the pool and having cocktails on the outdoor patio, they pull their head outside of the usual must-haves. I must have the open concept and I must have this type of kitchen. And it's now I must have friends my age that want to enjoy hobbies and activities that I love. And I must have those experiences. And if not, then I'm robbing myself of what life could be.
Yeah, so you're talking really about a change in lifestyle where people are living in many ways outside of their home. They're taking advantage of the clubhouse and the amenities and the public pool and so forth. And that, again, making the point, they're not left to have to care for all of that stuff because it's all part of what you offer.
Absolutely. There is a community center. It's 10,000 square feet, and people just in the morning eat their breakfast, read the newspaper, and they're walking up to the clubhouse. And you know, they're there all day. We close at 10, playing poker, and there's Wi-Fi up there. It's kind of a huge living room that they congregate, kind of like in college, you know, the dorms. They just collect there and they're having fun again with all their new friends.
Now, I gather when you help someone choose a home, you really want to get a sense of how they want to live their lives and also how close they are or how close they want to be to family that are in the area. What do you see in the community when it comes to the integration of outside family members coming into the community, spending time with their loved ones who live in your communities?
It's all about the grandkids. They want to see the grandkids grow up and see everything that they're doing, all the sports and the dance recitals. So the job market in Dallas-Fort Worth is really strong. A lot of people have transferred here, and when the kids are coming and the grandkids are here, it's the grandparents are not far along behind them to be a part of all of life's moments. Also, as you age in the home, it's just better to have family nearby if there were to be a health-related incident. Instead of having your parents in California or Florida, if everyone's local, it's easy to take care of them and make sure they're safe.
It's so interesting you say that because I have friends, the Heiseys, they're not watching, in St. Louis who are retired now, and they've done exactly that. They've moved up to Chicago from St. Louis to be close to the majority of their family and their grandkids and have moved into a community not unlike what you offer. And they are living life. I mean, I'm watching Instagram, I'm seeing their dinners that they're cooking on their patio, but I'm also seeing that they're making new friends. Some people might think the older we get, the less of an opportunity we have to forge new friendships. Not true, really, is it?
I find that it begins, you know, when you come out here, you've worked really hard raising your kids and working. Some people come out retired, but some people come out just the day they turn 50. They want the activities, clean, green, safe, beautiful community to kind of have that college life experience again, where they're meeting people and traveling, having happy hours. and just experiencing the best that life has to offer as soon as possible.
And what kind of services do you offer to members of the 55 plus community who are moving and they want the process to be easy? Some people are packing up houses that maybe they've lived in for most of their lives. They've raised families there. They have heirlooms. They're trying to downsize. They're making difficult decisions about, what do I get rid of? What do I keep? How do I move it? Do you consult with them on that level?
We do have outside companies we can recommend, but this is a family decision. And so I find that the kids understand we want either our single mom to be safe in a community and have fun and feel connected, or we want mom and dad to have this type lifestyle. So they come in here, they look at the houses together, they give their feedback, they help with the moving. It's just kind of a team effort. The people out here have really invested in their kids and raised them well, and now the kids are getting back and saying, we want you to have a great life at this stage.
Yeah, and nice job with the backdrop, by the way, giving people just a little sneak peek into what your homes look like. Walker Wagner, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So now let's turn to Eric Elmore. He's with First Investments in Planning as we talk more about how you actually move into a community like Del Webb that Walker Wagner just told us about. Eric, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we did hear Walker talk about people who are 50 and older, 55 and older. Empty nesters are deciding that they want to give up that house that they've had for so many years and downsize and live differently within a community. Their number one asset is their home. Is it not? Is that where their future lies for the most part when it comes to transferring into a community?
That's right. Most Americans' wealth is actually in their home.
In terms of inflation, if people are planning for retirement, or let's say 10 years ago, they set their sights on a certain goal, what they needed for retirement, have they been able to keep up with inflation, or are retirees finding themselves in a position where they're not quite where they thought they needed to be at this point?
That's exactly right. So it's been really challenging as of late, especially in the last 30 years with interest rates continue to come down. Typically, a retiree, let's say in the late 80s, early 90s, could go out to the bond market. They could purchase a 10 or 20, 30-year treasury earning high teen interest rates. Well, now that's not the case. And so the trouble is you still have inflation running 2 or 3%, but now you have 10-year treasury notes around 0.6%, 0.7%. You have 30-year treasury notes at around 1.5%. So it's really a challenging time for investors, retirees who are looking to lock in a good rate of return so they can have some income in their retirement years.
So if they want to avoid working longer, how do they compensate for that difference in number? How do they compensate for the rising cost of inflation and the lower interest rates that they're getting on investments?
Great question. And the short answer is you're just going to have to save more money.
And you may have to work longer, right? Or you may have to still continue to work on a part-time basis. So it's not one or the other. It used to seem like it was one or the other. You were working or you were retired. And now are you seeing that it's sort of striking a balance?
Exactly. Seeing people having to save more and work longer and hold off and taking Social Security benefits if in their situation, if that's what's best for them. And retirees looking at getting a part-time job and working as late as early 70s.
So we talked to Virginia Hammerle, an attorney who deals with estate planning and wills and medical directives and so forth, and a wide range of things. You also help people deal with asset protection. That is, should something happen to someone, are their assets protected? What is the number one mistake you see that people make, or the number one thing people overlook that then leaves their assets at risk?
Great question. A lot of my clients and prospects that I work with just don't seek out that advice. They don't seek out to try to find an attorney who can, like Virginia, that can help them guide them along the way and how they should protect their assets as far as what type of accounts should they open with their financial advisor, or what type of insurance coverages should they have with their insurance professionals, whether it's auto liability limits, whether it's home liability limits, whether it's an umbrella insurance policy to protect anything outside of accidents arising from those assets. all the way to long-term care insurance, life insurance, and annuities. So really just trying to work with retirees, clients, prospects to go out and seek advice and bring in a team of professionals that will help them reach their goals and make sure that they're protected, their assets are protected. And then that way, when they pass, if their children or grandchildren are the beneficiaries to their assets, maybe it's a nonprofit or a charity or a religious institution that they want to leave their money to. We want to make sure that that money that they worked so hard for many years, that money will be available to their beneficiaries.
We often hear about estate taxes associated with someone's death and their assets then being distributed among their beneficiaries. Not to dodge tax law, but are there ways that you advise people to diminish their tax liability for estate taxes and how they plan ahead of their death?
So if someone finds themselves where, let's say they have let's call it $12 million estate roughly, they should really reach out to an attorney and a tax advisor to get some consultation on their unique situation and what they can do as far as, protecting those assets and to make sure those assets are distributed when they pass, how they intend them to.
Let me ask you this. Generation skipping transfer. What is it exactly? What is the benefit of it? How do you work with it? I know nothing on it. I'm guessing some of our viewers don't either. You're our expert. Go.
So the generation skipping transfer tax is basically essentially aligned with the estate tax level. Typically, grandparents can gift their grandchildren $15,000 per person and not have to pay taxes on that, right? So, but if one that's an ultra high net worth retiree individual and they're trying to give all that money to their kids and or their grandkids and not pass down to the kids to try to avoid taxes, IRS isn't having it.
They're not having it. So you've just raised a red flag. So is it $15,000 annually per grandchild, I should say?
Yes, for minors.
For minors.
So they can be adults, yes.
So again, if you're lucky enough to have an estate of a certain amount and you'll never spend the money, you're better off allocating those dollars while you're still alive to your grandchildren, or they'll end up having to pay estate taxes on it upon your death.
That's right. If you want to make sure that your grandkids receive whatever amount that you want them to receive, and working with your tax attorney your tax advisor and your attorney, and making sure that you are not giving them more than the applicable law amounts at that point in time, then that is a very wise strategy for a grandparents, a retiree who's looking to pass money along to their grandchildren.
Is there a way to give them the money as minors before your death without them spending it frivolously or in ways that you may not necessarily approve of? Are there ways that you can also set up a protection so that that money isn't necessarily available to them to spend until they're of a certain age, but give it to them at a younger age?
That's right. So a trust would achieve that. So in the trust, you can establish and say, hey, at certain life events, at marriage, birth of a child, or a certain age, then the trust would say, then they're entitled to receive X amount of dollars at a certain life event, or at a predetermined time, or at a predetermined age.
Mm-hmm. And I think it goes without saying, we can close on this, that you and Virginia Hammerle are in agreement here that you need the will, the durable power of attorney, the healthcare directive, maybe a living trust, all of those things we talked about. You're in agreement that those are standard. And I want to leave you then with one additional question. When you counsel someone, we had talked about all the planning and money spent on the wedding. When you counsel someone on their financial future, do you make sure they have all of those documents as well? Do you direct them to someone who can help them with that?
Absolutely. That's my advice, is to let's bring in that team of attorneys and tax advisors and make sure we're taking a holistic view, and that we've taken everything in consideration to make sure that we could build and put together a plan that's going to best serve you and your legacy.
You might have to spend a little less on the flowers, maybe a little less on the dress, a little less on the per plate dinner. and you can cover your costs when you get married to set yourself up for a solid financial future and to have no uncertainty, as you say, when life events happen that are unexpected.
That's exactly right.
Eric Elmore from First Investments and Planning, thank you so much for joining us. And when we come back, we will visit with Baylor, Scott, and White Health. Stay with us. All right, everyone, we are back now with Dr. Cherese Wiley from Baylor, Scott, and White Health to give us some insight into how people are managing their personal medical health care during this difficult time. Thank you for being here, Dr. Wiley. And I want to start with that. There were some people who've had over their lifetimes a fear of going to the doctor. And I would think in the midst of all of this, it's easy for them maybe to be even more fearful. The pandemic has compounded that. What would you say to them?
You know, I want to encourage patients and let them know that the doctor's offices and hospitals are actually safer than the grocery store. And you're right, a lot of times people do have some reservations, but I want to encourage them and let them know that we have built a comprehensive safety plan designed to protect our patients, our providers, as well as our staff. So there are some things that you will be asked to do before arriving to our clinic. You'll be asked to arrive alone unless medically necessary to be accompanied by a guest. Your temperature will be taken as soon as you get to our clinics. You'll be asked a series of questions regarding your exposure to the risk of COVID-19. And if you are deemed high risk, you'll be directed to make a virtual visit because we do want to take care of these patients. But we also want to minimize the risk of exposure to our staff as well as other patients. Our waiting rooms have been rearranged to provide at least 6 feet of distancing. So we do our very best to call patients back in a timely fashion to get them out of the waiting rooms. But I do want to assure our guests and our viewers that here at Baylor, Scott and White, we are doing our very best to help patients feel comfortable and providing a safe environment for their visits with their physician.
You mentioned the virtual visit, and I know a lot of employers over the last few years, as well as health insurance companies, have encouraged people for certain things to go strictly virtual through various platforms. Teledoc comes to mind. Give me a sense from your perspective as a doctor. Obviously, the number of virtual visits has gone up in light of this pandemic. How effective can they be for certain things, and how effective are they not for others?
So great question. So for the most part, I will say patients are really enjoying video visits. As you stated, patients sometimes are nervous about coming out. So it's a great option for certain patients who are not ready to come into the clinic. And you also mentioned, for certain visits. And so there are certain things that we don't mind seeing patients for virtually. Of course, if you have symptoms related to COVID-19, that would be an appropriate cause to have a virtual visit. We want to screen those patients and direct them appropriately. Also, people with chronic medical conditions, those that may have depression or anxiety, or if you have a chronic medical condition that's fairly well controlled, that would be an okay visit. There are some things that should be seen in person, such as acute symptoms like abdominal pain or headaches, for instance. If these are acute symptoms, then you should be seen in our clinic. But things that are chronic, that are otherwise sort of manageable, it's okay to do a virtual visit for these types of conditions.
And I would think it's easier for you once you're sort of really virtually face-to-face with them on that virtual call, a little easier for you to help them work through the fear of the doctor to get them in to see you by letting them know all of the things you let us know. It is safe. There's no worry. There's no cause for concern here.
That's right. Patients feel more comfortable when they do hear that directly from their doctor. And I will even mention, if you do prepare for a video visit, there are a few things that you should consider. You want to make sure, number one, that your Wi-Fi works. You want to make sure that your audio is appropriate. These are some of the things that I have been faced with, having a virtual visit. There's, all the time you can, or I should say, sometimes you can run into, some obstacles. You want to make sure that you have good lighting, and you may even consider doing a dry run. But seeing our patients and providing that comfort that, yes, it's okay to come into the office really goes a long way with patients.
Preventative care is the best care. Colonoscopies to prevent colon cancer, for example. Mammograms to prevent breast cancer or detect it early. So are there any tests like that, any pre-screenings, any screenings that people can hold off on? Or are you saying to patients, if you're at high risk and you know it, make sure you still get the screening?
Yes. So I will start by saying that with the new screening procedures and dedicated units to separate potentially infectious patients from our general population, we are doing a good job, in keeping our patients safe, in a safe environment.
Mhm.
So we have continued to safely care for patients with non-COVID-19 related medical needs. We continue to perform, of course, urgent surgeries such as urological procedures, appendectomies, gallbladder surgeries, and of course, deliveries. But
Mhm.
to answer your question specifically, that should be answered on a case by case basis. So just
Mhm.
as you said, if you're considered high risk for colon cancer, then you should go ahead and get your colonoscopies. We are still doing those procedures. But if you've had normal colonoscopies and you're not currently having any symptoms, you may have that discussion with your doctor if you're not comfortable going in at this time. But again, I do want to assure patients that if they decide to come into the surgical centers, that they will be taken care of and they will have a safe environment. Same thing with mammograms. If
Mhm.
you are high risk, you shouldn't delay, and you want to speak to your healthcare provider about your particular case before you decide to put that screening test off.
Well, we're also facing an uncertain future, though, when it comes to kids going back to school. We don't know how
Yeah,
infectious they'll be once they're in a school environment, even if there's
that's
social
right.
distancing and other safeguards. And we also know that COVID could continue. The flu season
That's
could
right.
compound it. I don't want to be doom and gloom here, but I do want to be
That's right.
realistic and make people
That's
aware.
right.
How are you preparing for, or how should we prepare for, the possible convergence of all of these things and all of these unknowns?
Number one, you don't want to let up on those safety precautions. You want to implement, sometimes, we tend to get a little bit more comfortable with how we're, going about our day because people just adapt, right? So
Mhm.
you want to not let up on those safety precautions. If you have grandchildren or loved ones who are physically going back into the school, it may be, and I know I hate to say this to our grandparents because a lot of them are struggling, but it may be a good idea not to physically come into contact with them, especially if you have underlying conditions. You want to make sure you definitely get your flu shot. That's important. We can't forget that. And if you're over 65 or you have chronic medical illnesses, you want to make sure that you're getting vaccinated with your pneumonia, both doses of the pneumonia vaccine. That's important as well. And you want to just deal with the upcoming sort of unknown. It's unknown, we don't know,
Mhm.
but you want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can possibly do to prepare for our fall season.
How do we prepare for an increase in cases of mental health distress? I have a friend, for example, who was always very social, and she is now afraid. She's become
Yes.
agoraphobic. She is afraid to leave the
Oh,
house and be around people, even if they're keeping their distance, even if they're wearing masks. And to me, I
yes.
wonder, how many times are we going to see cases like that where somebody experiences, maybe for the first time in their life, or they've dealt with it in the past and now it's exacerbated, underlying anxiety, which leads to depression, leads
That's
people to
right.
substance abuse. I mean, any number of things could be born out of this. And there's a stigma attached to mental health when you say, I think I need help.
That is a great point to bring up. Unfortunately, I am seeing more and more, patients with anxiety and depression in my office, especially those ones who live alone.
Mm.
So you have to, number one, recognize some of the symptoms, as you nicely stated, of depression, worsening of your chronic medical conditions, using substance abuse more often, crying, more sadness. So some of the things that you want to do, after recognizing it, is to seek medical attention. I have had patients to reach out to me, and this is one of those cases that virtual visits would be okay, I think, to speak with your medical provider, because I do counsel patients over the phone. And sometimes we start medicines, but sometimes we also, are able to direct them to get regular counseling. So you want to do that. You want to make sure that, you're exercising, stretching, although sometimes people don't want to get out. They don't want to even exercise, but you have to sort of, prompt yourself to do that, because once you do it, you'll feel a lot better. One of the most important things that I can stress is, not to watch so much of the news. Of course, we want to stay up to date. We want to know what's going on, but, trying to decrease the amount of streaming that you're seeing with the news. And one thing that I've, counseled some of my patients on, especially my patients, around the sort of retirement age, I've encouraged them to go outside, maybe visit a friend. You guys put in social distances, social distant practices, make sure you're 6 feet away, make sure that you have your mask on, but meet at the park or meet in the backyard and just physically distance, but have a good conversation. If you're a grandparent, maybe drive by. That's what my parents are doing. They drive by the grandkids' houses, and just kind of wave and have a conversation with everyone, keeping their distance, because all of our technology is good, it's great, it's a way to substitute us not being able to be physically present, but just seeing those loved ones in person can also be helpful. So those are some of the things that I want to recommend. In addition, I want to suggest getting regular sleep, because that is something that I also see patients not doing. They'll stay up all night kind of watching television because they just don't have anything else to do. And so I try to encourage them to try to stay on a regular schedule. It's okay to catch up on movies you hadn't seen, but trying to keep a regular schedule, because the more you have a sleep deficit, the worse the depression and sadness will be.
Yeah, and the more you continue to watch, especially the news, even though it's my business, I agree with you entirely,
Yes.
the more it makes it more difficult for you to shut your mind off and get the
That's
rest you
right.
need. Yeah. Dr. Cherese
That's
Wiley from
right.
Baylor Scott and White Health, thank you so much. Great insight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation.